Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, and welcome to my first look at Star Trek Infinite. So we're taking a look at Star Trek Infinite today, and for those of you that don't know, Star Trek Infinite is pretty well, I'm not going to call it a reskin of the game Stellaris, but it's basically using the Stellaris engine and making a Star Trek game out of it. So yes, in some degrees it's a reskin, but it added things to the game, it took some things out of the game. While I'm sure you could go and get mods or workshop mods for Stellaris to add in Star Trek, this is a standalone game. You get your main civilizations here, which is fantastic. You know, you've got your United Federation of Planets, your Klingon Empire, your Romulan Star Empire, and your Cardassian Union. And these would be the skills that your leaders start with, so these little ones here. And then you've got the civilization, I wouldn't call them skills, but civilization effects, so, or qualities, they're there. And then you also have the type of government they are. This was really important in Stellaris itself because, you know, you have elections, or you've got an empire where there is no change. It just kind of goes down to the next child, I suppose, the successor, and then, you know, 20 years, or holds an election upon death. So, you know, you've got those different options, you've got those different thoughts, and I'm sure people will pick who they want based on who they enjoyed in the shows and movies over what their actual effects are. But for people who aren't necessarily as familiar with Star Trek but still got the game, they could easily pick based on those skills instead. After you've kind of decided who you want to play as, you need to go into settings first and see what sort of game details you'd want to do. Now, I'm noticing there's a very, very limited options in comparison to Stellaris. Stellaris has a lot more stuff you can do in here, and especially the galaxy size is very, very, very odd that it is a fixed size. I can't change this at all, so it stays there. Stellaris, you're able to do, you know, small, medium, large, like massive maps. Like, it provides you with a reasonably sized map. You know, this is pretty big and would probably take countless hours to actually defeat if you were going in a military route. But it is odd that you can't change the size, and a little bit unusual that you can't, you know, randomize where people start. That's a little bit odd. That is a quality that I really liked in Stellaris. But I guess the idea is that this is supposed to be a game based on the actual Star Trek universe, so things are in here that would be in the shows and in the movies. So that's my thought there. A little odd that there's no flexibility yet. Hopefully there will be. Another thing I want to point out is that, again, when you're in these settings, you can put on Iron Man mode right there, and it says the game is eligible for achievements, but then proceeds to not have achievements for the game, so there aren't any achievements actually out yet. So I'm not quite sure why that's here and presenting if there aren't achievements yet. I would think that there would be a little note saying that achievements are coming, but there isn't one, so that's a little odd in my books. So I started in and I played a little bit of the tutorial, actually the whole tutorial, and you play it as the United Federation of Planets. So you actually start in our solar system, which is super interesting, and, you know, the game looks very similar to Stellaris. You know, some of those components are actually pretty nice. Like, come on, look at the sun there. That's a pretty beautiful sun, if I do say so myself. And I was actually pleasantly surprised with the graphics. I had seen a little bit of gameplay footage that wasn't super great, but, you know, I was looking at, you know, the planets and the way I could rotate the screen, and just, it looked really smooth, it looked really crisp. And of course, starting in our actual solar system, our legitimate solar system, was interesting because you had an actual reference of what the planets were supposed to look like, so you had a loose idea. And I mean, I know it's not hard to to make a blue planet, but it does offer that nice little feeling that they were successful in representing things in a way that were decent. Look at the Earth. Look at that. Beautiful. This map as well, the galaxy map, is very similar to Stellaris, but you can see how beautiful this is. This is one of my favorite aspects of Stellaris, is being able to see your empire grow and all of the folks around you. Now, it is interesting starting the tutorial and being in such a small area. I would be very curious to see how that continues on as we play the game. One thing I will say about the tutorial is I had a lot of issues where I was trying to do stuff and then multiple pop-ups would appear on top of each other and the voice of the tutorial was still speaking. Even though I had paused the game at times, it would still pop up and cause a little bit of chaos and a little bit of confusion going through the tutorial. So that was not fantastic. Another thing that the tutorial did that I did not necessarily enjoy was it put all of your tutorial items into the mission log, and it stopped guiding you along, which wasn't exactly terrible, but sometimes it didn't necessarily explain everything step by step like some people would need. If you've played Stellaris, you're probably well on your way to understanding how the game works. However, I think for new players to the game, they may not understand, they may not be as familiar with the UI and how to navigate. This is a grand strategy game, and it is not just intuitive to learn right off the bat. It's not easy. I've played about 100 hours of Stellaris, and I'm relatively familiar with the UI there, but I think if you're coming new at this game, it might be a little bit hard to get into. I think there's a little bit of a learning curve there. One thing I do like is the ability of the ships to travel in a warp range based on how many star bases you've got. So rather than using hyperlanes or having it based around the ship's engines itself, they're able to travel within the full range very liberally, which is fantastic. One of the interesting additions to this game was the mission tree. So the mission tree is kind of, you're meeting certain tasks within the mission tree based on your civilization, unique for every civilization, and you're kind of meeting these requirements as you play through the game, and you end up getting effects, so rewards, or, for instance, this one, you've got an event starts, and, you can work your way through the tree, and then you've got instances where you're going to have to pick one or two of the one of the paths between two, whereas some of them you can see you can do both, but here you'll only be able to choose one. Now again, unique for each civilization, they'll have their own different path, I would imagine, which is a very fun, I think it's a good way to make the game a little bit of a campaign style. So your UI is very similar to Stellaris as well. You've got your map buttons, you've got your civilian ships, military, starbase, shipyards, planets, you've got your resources up top and your kind of mission items on the left-hand side of the screen. So again, and the timing up here. So very, very, very similar to Stellaris again. You have the ship design similar to Stellaris and the fleet manager as well. So as far as UI goes, it is very, very similar to Stellaris. If this is a new game for you, though, this would be pretty hard to navigate for first-time players, I would imagine. So, playing the tutorial and really taking your time and reading everything in the tutorial is important. I sat here for a very long time trying to figure out where the mission... so, you've got your mission log, but I had a really hard time figuring out where your mission tree was. You also do have an interesting situation here, which is your victory requirements. So this is scores. So for the tutorial, anyway, on this date, this is when the game would end. So in about 300 years. And it's based around all of your things. I think this is a better breakdown than what Stellaris had offered. So this isn't terrible. I would probably do it differently myself. I'd probably set it up to be, a victory by killing everybody. But this is a good way to end the game as well. Galactic tension is also a thing, which is fascinating, and, I feel like you would need to spend some time in here, but it basically indicates as galactic tension increases, there will be some effects. Now, let's talk price. So, Star Trek Infinite is $40 Canadian, which, is probably about $30 USD. And for the Star Trek Infinite Deluxe Edition, you're talking about $53 Canadian. So compared to Stellaris, which is in the $50-$60 range, the price is, kind of reasonable if you're looking for something that is strictly Star Trek. As far as Stellaris goes, it is probably a more well-rounded game, but if you're looking at getting all of the DLC, you're probably ending up with a price tag of $250 Canadian. Now, I have seen a lot of reviews for the game already today. It was not well received right out the bat. Steam reviews were mixed. The first 5 reviews were actually negative reviews. A lot of people calling it a reskin of Stellaris. A lot of people saying that they were having issues with the game launching, it crashing, the resolution. And I will echo the resolution. I did change it a few times and it wasn't actually changing. But I got around it later on. I think that there are certainly some bugs that could be worked out, just judging from what some folks are saying, and I think some people are a little bit disappointed in the release. I myself didn't have huge expectations going into this. I knew that it was going to be very similar to Stellaris, and I personally thought that a $40 price tag was reasonable, I guess, because of the fact that, you're talking, it's a branded game, it's Star Trek. Somebody had to pay for that. And ultimately, not terrible so far. There are a few things that I think I would need to wrap my head around a little more. There are a lot more pop-ups than I'm remembering there being in Stellaris, but with audio instead. There were some things where, I'd be about doing something and there weren't pop-ups, but there was audio. So, for instance, whenever a leader dies, I'd get, oh, we lost another, leader of the Federation or whatever, but then it wouldn't tell me who died. So there's no pop-up for it, there's no notification for it. It's just, oh, one of our leaders died. Okay, great, but who was it, and do they need to be replaced somewhere else, right? So I think spending more time with the game, you'd get used to it. I've only spent about an hour and a half in it, but I think, it has potential. It has potential, especially if they were to work out a few of these kinks. I think the game could be really great. I'm excited to play a little more and try the combat mechanics. That I think would be super interesting to do. But if you are interested in Star Trek, maybe this is your thing. For $40 Canadian, not a terrible game, not hugely expensive, and I'm sure you can actually have hours of fun with it. But of course, it won't be true to Star Trek. It won't have all those stories. It's just kind of playing with the characters, playing with the civilizations that are involved in that, and I think that's what people need to know, like, going into it as well. It's not going to be a story-based game. It's very much a sandbox grand strategy game. You know what? It's not a terrible game. I think for anyone who's interested in Star Trek and interested in a grand strategy game, this would be a really good option. If you were looking at playing Stellaris with a mod, I'm sure you could do that. I'm sure there's a mod out there. But if you wanted to have a specific Star Trek experience with, characters and some missions and the civilizations kind of built into an actual game itself without worrying about modding something, this could be it for you. But I think that's up to the user and the user's experience. Yeah, overall, not a bad game. Not an unreasonable price. It does sound like there are some glitches and a few odd things missing when you compare it to Stellaris. But I think the most important takeaway is that this isn't Stellaris. It is kind of like if you took Stellaris and made it into just a Star Trek game and put it in the Star Trek universe. That would be the best description. It has a lot of components that are in Stellaris, and it has a few unique components itself. But if you were to compare the two games and you were trying to pick them as just grand strategy games, you'd probably lean towards Stellaris. But if you're looking for something that's Star Trek specific and a grand strategy game for Star Trek, I think this would be where you'd want to be. So definitely look into it a little more if you're thinking this game might be it for you. I wouldn't not recommend it. It's a decent game. You know, if I was a bigger Star Trek fan, I think I would have a much more, I guess, emotional reaction to it, which would be a fondness of the fact that everything's there together. If they did this with Star Wars and sold it at $40 Canadian, I would be very content with that, and I would buy the game for sure. It's just, I think, connecting with that nostalgia aspect of what you're looking for, you know? That would be my thought process here. So let me know what you think about the game in the comments below, if you think it's worth it, or if you think a mod for Stellaris would simply be the better option. Do let me know as well if you did enjoy this video of my first look at the game, and if you want to see more of me actually play the game, let me know. I'm probably going to play it anyway, so let me know if you'd like to see it on the channel. And if you are new, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, of course. And as always, thank you for stopping by. Happy you did, and I'll see you next time.